we go.
You ready?
Yep.
Speak pretty clearly in this thing because the volume's a little quiet. I think we're live, RJ.
We're live.
Yes, we are? Cool. All right. Welcome, everybody. Quick introductions. My name is Paul Pway, CEO and co-founder of Edge, and I am joined with...
RJ, support and QA. Salutations.
Yes, the person shoulder to lean on when you have any problems with the general cryptocurrency, blockchain space, and especially if you have any questions about Edge. So today we've got a few things we want to chat about. Let's see, I'm a little bit off the side here. Let me squeeze in here now that I'm seeing our screen. So a few things to talk about today. What's on our list? What are we chatting about this Friday?
Yeah, so it looks like we're going to talk about Monero Hardfork first, but...
Yeah, hard forks, always a big thing. I've given multiple different talks on just hard forks in general.
I know, just last week was the Ethereum Hardfork.
Yeah, we were
just
talking about the upcoming Ethereum hard fork, and now we have an upcoming Monero hard fork, and we want to let you know how that affects you as a user, as a whole, your funds, what functionality is going into those hard forks. What we're doing in Edge because of the hard forks happening, or what we're not doing, because some of them are fairly innocuous and there's not as much to do.
Right.
We'll be talking about that, and there have been actually some user questions that have come up in the past day regarding...
Yeah, so a couple of questions. One's asking about, we are all Bitcoin and Twitter. He's asking about Bitcoin Cash, like SLP tokens.
Right,
or
SLP
cash
token
account.
standards.
And then another one from Broken Clock on Twitter, asking about integration and support for ENS domains.
Got it. Great things to talk about. Well, we don't support any of those. We can give people a kind of rough idea of what is on the horizon and what also is, kind of the factor in us deciding on what of those types of functionality do we support and when do we put it onto the roadmap. But kicking off first, the upcoming Monero hard fork, and as many people might know, Monero hard forks very frequently. So when we say hard fork, it doesn't mean that it necessarily splits into two different Monero chains.
Right, not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Yeah. It has happened in the past, but at least it's a change to the code that does require upgrades of all of the full nodes in Monero.
Right.
Rules are basically changing. The consensus rules are changing in Monero, and so the upcoming change, the next upcoming change is slated for, I believe, November 30th.
Yeah, and that's block 1978433. If you want to
1978433. But as many people know in the cryptocurrency space, blocks, especially in proof of work chains, don't have a precise amount of time. So it's not like that exact date will be the absolute definitive date when the hard fork takes place.
Yeah,
it might be off.
Hash rate.
It depends on the hash rate, how quickly blocks are found, or how slowly they're found.
Right.
So it might be a slightly different day, but they haven't specified an hour, what hour it would happen. Rather, the day November 30th. But I doubt it'll going to be much far off from November 30th. So what do we know is going first and foremost into this hard fork from Monero?
Yes, so it looks like what they want to do is try to eliminate like ASIC mining, make it more that you can use CPU mining and even to an extent GPU mining a lot better than before.
And I think this is pretty much what Monero does more than anything else in every 6-month hard fork. They change the hashing algorithm to make it such that ASICs and to some degree even CPUs aren't as optimal as CPUs.
Right.
Right. So that's coming up, and then what they're changing the hashing algorithm to is one called RandomX.
RandomX sounds nice.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. It sounds almost like they're randomly choosing multiple different hashing algorithms. But what's interesting about it is what it's able to do for the time or the hash rate on various types of systems. And you have some of the specs in front of you, right? So on CPU versus GPUs, we're noticing a significant change in
so there's a
hashing hash
huge
rate.
bump up. Like, for example, the Ryzen 9 CPU that has 12 cores and 24 threads, it's going to have a hash rate close to 12,000 hashes per second and only consuming power of about 150 watts. And if you compare that to like a 1080 Ti, that consumes about 230 watts. And
so comparable wattage burn
right.
at about over 10 to 12,000 hashes per second using the new hashing algorithm.
Yes.
What was it before? Was it mentioned what they were at?
They didn't specify.
With Kryptonite is the current hashing algorithm being used by Monero. So I have a few specs here that show on a Ryzen 7, on an AMD Ryzen 7 CPU, that the original Kryptonite algorithm was at 520 hashes per second, but at RandomX it bumps up to 41,000 hashes per second on
That's
fast
even
mode.
a bigger bump. It's an exponential bump.
It's nearly an exponential bump. However, on GPUs, the bump up is almost negligible. It goes from 626 hashes per second to 660 hashes per second. So this effectively tells you that it is leaning towards making CPUs more optimal, thereby making the use of GPUs suboptimal and less, I guess I'd call it less economical. So the one thing that's not given, at least the numbers I just mentioned, they mentioned the hashes per second, but it doesn't mention the total energy burn for the CPU versus the GPU. But we can estimate based on the numbers of a fully taxed out CPU, the Ryzen 9 at about 200 watts.
Right.
200 or
150 watts.
150 watts.
Compared to a GPU.
Right, and so here the 660 Ti is at about 103 watts, but its increase is only about 10%.
Right.
It only increases about 10% from 600 to 660 hashes per second. So it's definitely leaning towards making CPUs more viable, and that nowhere here is it mentioned ASICs. Yeah. And so for the most part, it seemed like ASICs will pretty much be wiped out by this change.
Yeah,
but until they build an ASIC, it'll eliminate the current round of ASICs, but it doesn't mean you can't take those, you can't build new ones. In the future, you could build a new one if it's financially feasible enough that could mine Monero. Now, one thing is, knowing that Monero changes every 6 months, it's almost not so interesting to buy an ASIC. All the R&D to build an ASIC just to know that in 6 months it'll be out of date.
Because the algorithm will change.
Algorithm will change. Unless you make the ASIC flexible enough to be used on other algorithms.
Other coins.
And other coins.
Yeah, you can point it at other ones.
But realize that the only difference between ASICs and GPUs and CPUs is that ASICs are fixed.
Yeah.
They have a fixed algorithm, but that's what makes them fast.
Right, because they specialize in one thing.
They're
very
one
good
thing.
at one thing.
But if you make them where they can change and mine different coins, then you're adding flexibility, which will inevitably make them slower and less efficient. So it's always this trade-off between you want to do one thing really, really well, or do a bunch of things but slower.
But not too well.
And not as well. The jack of all trades versus the person that specializes. So that's the number one thing that I think people are noticing in almost every single Monero hard fork, and this one definitely has it as well. The switch to RandomX, making ASICs pretty much dead, for the time being, and then making CPUs and GPUs more optimal to use.
So with this change, could we start seeing maybe like a lot more CPU farms, kind of like how we see on YouTube of like these huge ASIC farms or graphic cards farms? Now we're going to have CPU farms for Monero.
I think what we're seeing right now, the CPU farms are basically the botnets running on people's computers inside of a browser from an ad that's served.
Right, that's another,
from some porn
another
site.
incentive.
So admittedly, Monero is easily one of the largest currencies that is maliciously mined, meaning mined on someone else's computer that doesn't realize they're mining it.
Yeah.
And in a way you can do that because mining is relatively competitive on a CPU.
Yeah.
You don't need an ASIC to be competitive, but then everybody is running a CPU. Your phone is a CPU, your laptop is a CPU. And so the incentive for someone to put malware on your computer that can mine Monero is very high.
Now it's higher.
But putting software on your computer, some malware to mine Bitcoin is pointless because your computer's so slow it wouldn't mine anything.
Yeah, we'll just be kibbles and bits.
Yeah, it wouldn't be worth the money you'd pay to get access to a botnet, via the dark web.
Right.
So that is an unfortunate aspect of being ASIC resistant. And I know we've talked about this on the show before, but there's other unfortunate aspects of being ASIC resistant, is that if you can be mined using a GPU or CPU, that means that someone that wanted to attack the network could easily shift power from computing something else in the world.
Yeah.
They could be computing some kind of cure for cancer, looking for oil and whatnot, but shift that computing over into mining your coin and your blockchain and potentially 51% attack it.
Right.
So that's like the weird trade-off here is that, it's more quote-unquote decentralized because more people have access to hardware that could mine the coin.
Everyone has access to CPU.
Everyone's got a CPU.
A lot more.
And nowadays, everyone has access to a GPU.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the whole world is full of them, and now you have this pile of hardware that could attack the chain. Now, granted, Monero is a fairly popular and well-mined cryptocurrency. It has good value, good market cap, and so it's a bit more resistant to that. But it's not 100%. Another thing is 100%, but definitely it is an attack vector to be concerned about.
Another thing to bring up, so with the change to CPU, with something like a supercomputer, have a huge advantage over these popular CPUs like the Ryzen 9.
Yeah, in a way they would. The thing about supercomputers, though, is that they're generally built to be just incredibly fast at any cost.
Yeah.
They're super expensive. They're huge. Barely anyone has access to them. and they're not necessarily built to be efficient,
Right.
like cost efficient.
Yeah.
So you're trying to solve problems that you simply can't solve with any other computers. Now, in cryptocurrency mining, it's all about efficiency. It's the amount of power you burn versus the money you gain.
Yeah.
And if you're not able to be profitable in that respect, then it's just simply not worth it.
Right.
Versus a supercomputer where we just don't have anything that can solve this puzzle, this problem in the next 10 years. Well, this is the closest thing we've got. So then you put on a supercomputer, sometimes at almost any cost.
Right. Right.
So efficiency, while I don't know the exact numbers, if anyone out there on the internet actually has answers to what is the efficiency of supercomputers, the power efficiency of trying to mine on them, that would be an interesting number
I would like to look
see.
at that.
Yeah. And especially for currencies like Monero, where ASICs just aren't much of an option and GPUs aren't that efficient, at least not yet. So other things are going into the Monero hard fork as well. What else we got going to the Monero hard fork? We as well, not just the hashing algorithm, but also something that actually affects end users.
What's that?
Right? So end users using Monero might be familiar with a thing called payment IDs.
Okay.
Right? So whenever you send a Monero transaction, especially if you send Monero to an exchange.
You got to have the payment ID so they can, locate the transaction.
Exactly.
That came from you.
So one might ask in the Bitcoin world, why does Bitcoin not have payment IDs?
Yeah. But you can just look it up on Explorer. The
You can
public
explore
address. It's public.
It's because you can have multiple addresses.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to have multiple addresses. Monero hides all of your multiple addresses behind one big address, something called a stealth address.
Yeah.
So that's your Monero address. You'll notice in Edge and most Monero wallets, that address doesn't change.
Right.
Now you can send money to it, but you can't see the money that's been sent to it.
Right.
Now the purpose of payment IDs is that if multiple people are going to send your one address money, how do you know who it came from?
Yeah.
Right? You don't know where's the source of the money. And this is especially true for exchanges that might have one Monero wallet, but that's a shared wallet across thousands of people.
Mm-hmm.
So one user depositing Monero into, say, an exchange like Binance might be using the same address as a different user. How is Binance supposed to know where the deposit came from?
Yeah, which one's which?
Which one's which? So a payment ID is a way to differentiate that. And historically, the payment ID was separate from the address. It basically just was sent with the transaction.
Yeah.
But it effectively reduced privacy to some degree.
Right.
Right? Because you could see the payment ID. So instead, what is being forced onto the ecosystem now, is what is an embedded payment ID. It's embedded in the address. You could take your one address and effectively munge the payment ID into it and present that to the end user. And when they send money, it still goes to the same place. You can
Right.
still see the funds, but you don't see the payment ID separated out of the transaction. The address looks unique. So it's almost you're giving different addresses to different people,
Yeah.
but the money still goes into the same place.
Gotcha.
Right. And so those are going to be phased out. They're no longer going to be supported by the network. Now, this is where apps may actually have to change their UI. It's not just a
Yeah.
backend.
So does that mean we'll eventually remove our payment
Yep, we
ID
have-
options, and
exactly.
exchanges are gonna look into removing that option as well?
So exchanges have to remove it,
Yeah.
because there's no other way for them to determine what user
Uh-huh.
the money's coming into, unless they were to create multiple Monero accounts, multiple Monero wallets. So yes, and many exchanges actually are already not using payment IDs. They're using the embedded payment IDs that go right into the
Okay.
address. But in Edge, there's an option in the app when you send money to add a payment ID.
Right.
Effectively, that's just simply going to go away. We just simply delete the code, and you no longer send a payment ID. Now, when you receive money in Monero, you have the option of embedding that payment ID into an address. Edge doesn't currently support that,
Okay.
because no matter what, you own your own money, so you don't have to worry about who you're doling that out to like an exchange does.
Yeah.
So we just simply have your one address. But that is one thing to be aware of. Don't actually try to embed a payment ID into a transaction, because it's no longer valid onto the network, in case you're running an older version of a wallet that supports Monero.
Gotcha.
So one thing to be aware of.
Good heads up.
Yep. There's another thing that they're enforcing. What I've noticed about this release is a lot of it is taking rules that Monero had before that were soft. Like, you didn't have to do these things. Like payment IDs were optional, and you could use the embedded payment IDs, and they were recommending that you did.
Yeah.
Now they're making it mandatory.
Yeah, so now it's a requirement.
Yeah, they're
Right.
taking kind of optional things and making them a requirement. Same thing with a requirement of mixing
Yeah.
So in Monero can mix funds and create multiple outputs and multiple inputs. So now all transactions are required to have 2 outputs.
Minimum of 2 outputs.
Minimum of 2 outputs, and that protects privacy because now you can't tell effectively where the money is going. You can't tell if it's a change. So like in Bitcoin, when you send money, there's typically 1 output that goes to who you're sending to, and then 1 return address.
Yeah, the change.
The change.
Right? Yeah.
But sometimes if you're sending all of your money, you send it just through 1 output.
Yeah.
So what Monero is requiring is always sending 2,
No matter
minimum
what.
2, no matter what.
2 outputs.
The equivalent in Bitcoin would be I'll send 2 outputs to the same person if I
Yeah.
want to spend all my money.
Right.
If I spend part of my money, I send 1 output to one person, send 1 output back to myself for
Yeah.
change. Here, it'll always be 2 outputs, 1 to the person and another 1 to the person if I spend all my
If
money.
it's all the money, like a max
Right.
send.
And that's at least 2 outputs, but it could be more. So that does increase privacy. And this is one of the things that I do love about Monero is that they are making privacy by default. And this fork is going directly in that direction.
Yeah, so it's more privacy oriented.
More privacy oriented, taking the optional things and making them
Required.
making them required. As well, another change that's going into this release is a requirement that in order for you to spend funds,
Yeah.
it has to have been confirmed for 10 blocks.
Yeah, I remember the 10 confirmation times for transactions to confirm. So what are they doing differently this time?
So the main thing, once again, just like we had mentioned with the payment IDs and the 2 outputs, now it's mandatory.
Mandatory.
So Edge enforced this in our app where when you receive money or change from money you've spent before, required 10 confirmations before you could spend it.
Yeah, that's sort of like 0 out of 10, 1 out of 10.
Yeah, you'll see it.
You'll see it like
Monero.
yellow in progress.
Yep, you'll see the transaction progress from 0 to 10 confirmations, and then it's confirmed.
Yep.
The network didn't hard enforce that you couldn't spend it even if it had just 1 confirmation, but it was recommended
Yeah.
for privacy and security. Now it's absolutely required.
And yeah, then like you said, they turned that optional thing to something as a
Something-
requirement now.
Something required. And Monero has 2-minute block times. It's right off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, maybe it's 2.5. But around 2-minute block times, you realize that's about 20 minutes. So there is a bit of an inconvenience there. It's nothing new for Edge users because this is something we've already enforced.
doing.
Yeah, we've
Yeah.
already been doing. So what do you have to do if you have Monero in various types of wallets? If you have it in a paper wallet, well, it's just a private key. There's nothing for you to do until you actually have to sweep it using some other
Wallets, Monero wallets compatible, or like Edge.
or like Edge.
Yeah.
So Edge, you don't have to do anything. Even if you don't upgrade to Edge, the only thing that'll happen, if you don't upgrade your version of Edge, the worst thing that'll happen is you'll still have the payment ID button, which you just can't use.
Yeah, it's not
Right?
gonna
If you,
work.
if you try to add a payment ID, that transaction just doesn't go through. Or it might go through, but the payment ID effectively just gets dropped.
Okay.
Like the recipient won't see it. If you have any kind of wallet that actually parses the transactions and decrypts the transactions client side, then those will have to be updated. So there are, obviously a full node does
Yeah.
that, and there's a few others that may have to do it. Even some mobile wallets that do that, like Cake Wallet. So be aware those actually parse a lot of the transactions and decrypt them online and not online, but on your device. Those will need an update after the hard fork. But My Monero, Edge, and from what I hear, a few others, Koinomi, Garda, those shouldn't have a requirement to
Yeah,
update.
no need to do anything as a user.
As usual,
Should
you won't
be
have to
good.
do anything. Yep. But cool. So hard fork, November 30th. Users don't have to worry.
Yeah.
Just a few things that you're already doing will now become mandatory.
Right.
Especially if you're on Edge, they'll just
Yeah.
become mandatory.
And if it's the confirmations, you're already on it.
We're already
Which has
requiring those confirmations. So really nothing changes. If you're a miner, a lot potentially changes.
Yeah, you gotta
if
keep
you're
up,
mining on it,
keep
yes.
up to date.
Keep up to date throughout your ASICs if you somehow have any ASICs that were mining Monero or use them for something else.
Yeah.
Let us know if you have any other questions in that regard. So that's Monero. What else were we talking about today? We're talking about some
Yeah,
user questions that came in today.
Let's touch base on Bitcoin Cash, SLP tokens.
SLP tokens,
and
got it.
cash accounts.
Cash accounts,
yeah.
got it. So SLP tokens, cash accounts is actually related to the last question that we were asked about ENS.
Okay, ENS
naming
domains.
serving. So
Yeah.
cash accounts and ENS are somewhat similar. It's
So
just a
like
way of
domain
naming.
kind of stuff, naming.
Wallet
Got
and
it.
wallet naming. But regarding SLP tokens, this definitely isn't the first time we've been asked about this.
Yeah.
They are just as a what is an SLP token? It is a token standard on Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah, so kind of like the side tokens on the Bitcoin network or like Ethereum tokens. So that would be kind of like the analogy.
Exactly, like an ERC20.
Yeah.
In the Bitcoin world, the closer analogy would be things like Mastercoin,
Mastercoin.
branded to Omni now.
Yeah, there was like Dark Coin or something before, I think.
Not Mastercoin. Mastercoin was always just it was Mastercoin, now branded to Omni,
Okay.
as well as Counterparty,
Yeah,
which for the
Counterparty.
most part is kind of dead now. I don't know any projects that are still really on Counterparty, but that type of a protocol on Bitcoin is what SLP is on Bitcoin Cash.
Gotcha.
And there are a few great wallets that are supporting SLP tokens. The main thought process for us as to whether or not to support new functionality is that Edge we define as a non-custodial exchange, and the assets that people want to specifically buy, sell, and trade,
Right.
and that have support with our exchange partners are the
Yes.
ones that we'd want to support. So adding support for an SLP token that doesn't really have any of our exchange partners able to support trading into them makes for a less compelling feature.
We want things that kind of close the loop. in
Exactly.
The economics behind the wallet.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
being able to trade it for other coins and whatnot. It's something that
Exactly.
can complete it. Or even to just buy and sell it.
Correct, exactly. Like imagine if Binance added support for a token,
Yeah.
but all you could do was hold it, and you
Yeah.
couldn't actually convert one token to another.
Yeah,
That would
so-
be a little bit odd, right?
Right.
And since that is the primary use case and functionality of Edge is as an exchange, it's a little bit more odd for us to add a token. And actually, this is not just a token; it's an entire technology to support tokens, which is
Yeah.
far more complex. It's easy for us to flip the switch and add like an ERC20 token. It's harder for us to add the entire infrastructure to support SLP. But we would consider doing it if there were a good number of tokens on SLP that are getting good trade volume on the Binances and the Bitrexes of the world.
Right, and if our swap partners started taking it also, that would be
Exactly.
another big step. in
That's actually a
considering
major
it.
thing is if our swap partners, of which we've got 8,
Yeah,
swap
8.
partners, Shapeshift, Changely, ChangeNow, Godex, Fox Exchange, CoinSwitch, and Total,
Huh.
and whatnot. If they supported tokens on these protocols, then that definitely completes the loop of us
Yeah.
adding an asset to the Edge exchange experience for the users. So apologize for those that are like, oh man, I really want my SLP tokens. And us effectively right now saying, not quite on the
Things could
roadmap.
change. It
Things can change.
depends on how things
It's
go.
not quite. So I'd say
So-
knock on the door first of our exchange partners. That
Yeah.
makes it then much more compelling for us. And of course, just seeing that the tokens get good interest level, like
Yeah.
specific ones, not just SLP as a whole, but specific tokens. Like what is the killer token for
What's the
SLP?
hottest token for SLP?
Yeah, what's a hot token? So I mean, early Ethereum ERC20 tokens when they first launched were all kind of garbage.
Yeah.
But I felt like for example, Augur and
Augur
Rep
was
tokens
kind of like
was
a
one
big
of the
one,
first
old
big
school
ones,
first ones.
right? And to some degree, even some of the stablecoin attempts
Yeah.
started making tokens interesting. So for Omni, that was Tether,
Yeah.
right? Tether made the Omni protocol interesting to implement for exchanges and wallets.
Right.
And SLP kind of needs that.
They need that kind of substitute that
They need that
matches that.
notable token that brings a good amount of interest. So it's kind of our soft and squishy response to SLP token support.
Yeah.
Not quite on the roadmap yet, but we're keeping an eye on
Yeah,
it.
but not 100% no. So pester our partners. Try to get
exactly.
them on board.
And in that regard, from the BCH community, there's a request for cash accounts.
Yeah.
And so cash accounts, similar to ENS, where there's also a question about us implementing ENS, is basically a wallet naming service.
Yeah. So like Theo.
Somewhat like FIO,
Yeah.
right? But a simplified version of it. It only supports one main thing, which is register your address on a blockchain associated with a handle,
A handle. Okay.
a name.
A name.
So
yeah.
like you could be RJ,
Yeah.
and I could be Paul or whatever handle you want. Someone else can now look up that handle on the blockchain and see what your address is for various cryptocurrencies that your wallet supports.
So you can add multiple addresses to that handle if
So-
you wanted to.
ENS, yes.
ENS,
So
yes,
you can
okay.
support different addresses from different currencies. Cash address, community, please forgive me for not knowing the definitive answer here, but cash address, I'm not 100% sure if it only supports BCH or if it actually does support other currencies as well. So it would be definitely far more interesting to support more than just BCH on cash address, but I don't 100% know that. So
Gotcha.
I apologize for my slight ignorance here at the show, but that's one thing I'm going to look into for sure.
It looks like we got a comment from Matthew. Thanks for the heads up on the hottest tokens, Spice, Flex, and Sai.
SAI, S-A-I.
So
So we'll definitely look into those, Matthew.
check
Thanks for letting
those
us
out.
know. We'll find out what those do, how they're used, maybe if they're using some interesting, somehow Bitcoin Cash smart contract that could make it interesting as well. Matthew, definitely let us know if there's any specific instant exchanges like the Changeleys and Change Nows of the world that support any of those tokens. We'd love to chat with them about it.
Right on.
And so it's something to definitely look at. One thing as well, if there's some real diehard fans that do love Edge and love SLPs, SLP tokens, our code is open source. We'd be happy to accept a pull request to add support for the tokens, especially if it's a fairly efficient implementation that doesn't require a lot of code and a lot of resources on a user's device. So if there is a submission, then we're definitely happy to take a look at it. Regarding the naming,
Let's
so
go
regarding the
back to
naming service, so ENS and cash address do offer. Colin, thanks a whole lot for listening. SideShift, I know the folks over at SideShift, so I will definitely chat.
Another
with,
Spice.
another one, another mention of Spice, which is a hot token. So SideShift and Andreas Brecken is actually one of the exchanges that we're looking at having implemented. So it's awesome to hear. Sorry for knocking over the microphone. It's awesome to hear, and it gets us all that much closer to getting support for SLP. So I'll definitely swing Andreas a question online about that. So regarding the naming, maybe one of you guys, Colin or Matthew, can comment as to whether or not cash address supports not just Bitcoin Cash addresses, but addresses for other currencies as well.
Okay.
So ENS does, FIO definitely does, and a few other formats. Now, one thing about these is that they're just simply name resolution, and then it ends at that.
Right.
I want to know what Monero address you have for RJ, the handle. Great, I resolved that. The thing that we are excited about is the FIO protocol, which does that, but it also does a handful more things that both increase privacy and increase functionality for name resolution. So with FIO, yes, you are able to register various addresses for various currencies on the FIO blockchain.
Okay.
And then resolve them.
Yeah.
So you can look me up.
Yeah, just by name.
Just by name and send me money. But as well, it allows you to send private encrypted payment requests.
Okay.
So once I have your name, sending you money is one thing, but what if I want to ask you to send me money?
Yeah.
On other chains, that's not inherently possible with those protocols. With FIO, I can send you a payment request, and with that payment request, I can send you a unique address.
Yeah. Like
That's not seen. A
payment
one-time address. Like with Bitcoin, I can send you a uniquely generated address from my Bitcoin wallet that only you see.
Yeah.
And so when you pay it, no one knows that was specifically from you.
Yeah.
Right. That's actually encrypted.
Other than you, right?
Other than
you
me.
would know that
I would
it's
know.
specifically for that person.
So that payment request is fully encrypted from my device, end-to-end encrypted until you receive it, and then you choose to actually go and pay it.
Yeah.
And not only that, but the payment request can have some metadata with it, saying, hey, this is what I'm asking you money for, to pay me back for lunch that we had
so
the other
like
day.
a little text message in there.
Almost like a little text message.
Yeah.
And then when you pay it, you can send metadata with that payment that's also encrypted end-to-end.
Yeah.
So the information of you sending that payment to me isn't visible to anyone else.
Right.
So it's this metadata, encrypted metadata transaction layer separate from the blockchain. It uses the FIO blockchain, which is a fork of EOS, which allows you to have a number of free transactions for just a small amount of EOS. And it doesn't have any of the smart contract capabilities of EOS. They ripped it out. They only wanted name resolution and transaction metadata. So it's a much richer set of functionality for kind of wallet interoperability.
Yeah. Operate across different wallets.
Different wallets, different currencies, and that's what I think makes it interesting. One thing that is not going into the first release of mainnet of FIO, but is on the roadmap, is being able to even whitelist people.
Yeah.
So you can make it such that a person can send you money, and they will see a very specific address from you, and you'll be able to send them money, and you'll see a very specific address from them, not their global publicly visible address. Right. So when you register your addresses on FIO or ENS or on cash address, someone can see that one address is associated to your handle kind of forever.
Yeah, but
it's
not
very
all,
public.
Right.
But not all the other ones.
But not all the other ones.
By whitelisting somebody, right, you can actually give them a very specific address that they can repeatedly pay using FIO. And that's kind of this encrypted channel link you make between two different users on FIO. So there's a lot more to it than just simply wallet naming, which is what makes us a bit excited about it. Now, granted, hopefully to answer the question of will we support some of these others, we are actually implementing support for resolving names on other protocols such as ENS. So when people type in an ENS name to send some Ether, it'll resolve the address.
Yeah.
What we're excited about is the additional functionality on FIO where we'll resolve FIO addresses as well, but you can actually register your own.
Yep.
So there's the registration of your address, managing your address, and then there's resolving other people's address. So we're looking to support resolving addresses across multiple different name services, but our definite focus is around supporting FIO specifically for creating your address and sending this payment metadata along with it. And I think that as a whole provides a better overall experience. But these other protocols, I think they're good. They're a step in a good direction, and we'll support them for name resolution.
Right on.
Cool.
A question: when you mentioned it sends metadata when you do a transaction to the receiver, could it also be where when Edge receives a payment and it can have it automatically tagged by the sender?
So
in that part?
Edge does have its own metadata layer,
Yeah.
right? So we have an encrypted metadata layer, but it's not meant to be transacted between users. It's strictly for the end user of Edge to save some metadata of a transaction that they saw. It's encrypted and it's backed up and it's synchronized between their devices. The metadata layer of FIO is to be able to end-to-end encrypt, send to somebody else.
Got it.
So right, it's that transactional layer, and that's separate from the blockchain transaction of the money that you're sending. So you could send some Bitcoin Cash, but alongside a FIO transaction, send some encrypted metadata on the FIO blockchain. And so, Colin, thanks for clarifying. Yes, the SLP tokens are implemented on the opportune field of BCH. You know, Bitcoin is a smaller opportune field, so it's not nearly as flexible, and that's what I meant to say if I hadn't said it. So we'll continue to check out the cash accounts protocol. If you know of any simple APIs that allow us to do name resolution of cash accounts, where basically you can basically, as you type in a user's name, goes to a service that can resolve to an address or multiple services ideally. That way you can double check them against each other.
Got it.
If there's a service that can do that, then that could make for a fairly simple implementation, and it's something that we would definitely consider. But cool. All right. So I think we're a little over on our time, our half-hour slot, 12:30. Last thing to cover is really events and what we're up to. So I think it's changed a whole lot since last week, but if you didn't tune in last week, I will be at LibitConf, but right before that, Blockland Cleveland, December 9th and 10th. We'll be there. I'll be talking about wallets and exchanges. And then LibitConf this year, it is in Uruguay. So I'll be in Uruguay, and that's in December 12th and 13th. And I might actually also be in one or two other cities in South America before returning for the holidays. So if you're at any of those events, definitely swing by, say hi. Look forward to seeing you guys.
Yep.
And if you have any other questions for us, definitely feel free to tune in next Friday. And even before then, shoot us a question online, on Twitter, here in the YouTube channel. Happy to answer the questions or get them covered live or on the show.
Right on. So
cool.
Well,
What's our outgoing message, RJ?
Yeah, not your keys.
Not your coin. Take care, guys.
Right. Bye.